Okay. Welcome to the river, everyone, and everyone gathered here live today, and those who are joining us on video. May you be blessed wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the river and joining us here on River Branch. For those watching on video, if you ever want to come and join us live, it starts every Shabbat on Saturday at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And if you do, you want to go to River Branch website and just type in riverbranchfellowship.com. And as a part of that, you'll be able to scroll down on the home screen and you'll see the subscribe button. And just hit that subscribe button and you just put in your first and your last name and your email. And we will send you out the weekly newsletter, which contains the live link to the gathering. And come join us if you're led to. We'd love to see you. All right. The greatest in the kingdom. The greatest in the kingdom. You know, this was something that those who walked with Messiah almost 2,000 years ago actually considered. Should they have considered this? And in one sense, I think he desires us to finish our race in the time domain. In another sense, he wants us to check our hearts. And so what does this sort of greatest in the kingdom mean? What did the disciples, the Talmidim of Messiah, grapple with? And why did they grapple with it at all? What is this place between having the right perspective of this and having the wrong perspective of it in our hearts? And how do we get from the wrong perspective to the right perspective? What does this mean? As we look at sort of finishing the addendums to the Never Walk Alone series, I wanted to finish with this, just in not only in a sense of reminder, but encouragement to all of us that there is a final stage. There's a final age in the great plan of redemption. And there is a great reason and a great servitude that is coming. And all that you've gone through, all that you're going through, all that we may yet to go through is not in vain. And although it may be havel or temporary, as King Solomon would put it, it is with purpose. And so for us to understand that purpose, that little in our lives, perhaps has more meaning to it than we sometimes really think as we go through the struggles and the challenges of being in the time domain, in this test we call life. Just going to give you a quote here. This is from Earl Nightingale. He was an famous American radio speaker, and he always dealt with mainly subjects of human character development. And basically he says, our rewards in life will always be a direct ratio to our service. Now he's speaking from the position of we reap what we sow in this life, and that is a absolute true biblical truth as we sit in the time domain. But does this principle, does it carry on in a greater spiritual sense? Is this just a shadow picture of this, we reap what we sow? And is there something coming? Is there a reason for us to understand something in the test that would actually have not only meaning for the age to come, but eternally? And so he may be speaking of the time domain and the basic principles of reaping what we sow. But I think there's a greater thing for us in the house of Israel and regarding the great plan of redemption for us to think about. Last week, we sort of finished off and we looked at the Aleph and the Tav in the Proto-Sinaitic. And what was recorded at the time of the house of Israel being delivered from bondage out of Egypt, recorded in the great Exodus, and then what would go into the land of Canaan, which would become the land of Israel. And we see that these pictorials of the first and the last letters of the Hebrew alphabet represent this oxen and this ancient Tav. And Messiah made a statement that he is the beginning and the end, the Alpha and the Omega, the Aleph and the Tav. And so this start of understanding the great house of Israel and what he's doing with his people and how this was reflected in the ancient languages at the time of the Exodus and going into the promised land is no coincidence at all. And so we considered that. In Mark 10:45, our Messiah made this great statement. Even as the Son of Man came to be served, but did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. This essence of purchasing and taking full accountability for his great plan of redemption. No other faith actually contains this. Sometimes we're flippant with this as to what's going on. Sometimes we just take it for granted. Other times we maybe don't remember it the way we should. And as we come into the spring appointed times this year and we think about this great plan of redemption, it is time for us to actually consider what this really was all about. Was he serving into his great plan of redemption and therefore serving all of us? And what was the example that he gave right to the point of death? So he made this statement in the context of a mother crying out, the sons of Zebedee and Yaakov and Yochanan, and requesting her sons to be at his side in the kingdom. What was this thing that they knew? They knew that it was not over, that this wasn't just it, as Catholicism tends to just continue to show Messiah dead on an ancient Tav, but that's not where it was all going to end in regarding the great plan of redemption. But it was going to allow it to get to a place where his great plan would be fulfilled. And they sensed and knew that there was the completion or the coming of this full great plan of redemption, which they'd learned in the Torah and had practiced their whole lives. And that the fall appointed times and his great plan and his return was all a part of this picture, the kingdom from heaven. And they knew this. And so they were making requests. And as a part of that, their hearts maybe weren't always in the right place. At least the Talmudim didn't seem to be, and we'll take a look at this. His disciples were grappling with this. Was it a matter of heart? But this mother crying out, I think her heart was in the right place. She knew. And so this request was going, the servitude, the shadow picture of a mother, the power of a woman, the fantastic shadow picture that this really is. And what does that teach us today? He went on to say in Matthew 11:27-28, all things have been handed over to me by my Father. All things. All means all. No one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son. In other words, it's a statement of Echad. They are one. And anyone to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. So we wish, or he's desiring as his great prayer before he went to the ancient Tav, that we would be one with him as he was one with the Father. Come to me, all who labor, who are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. This understanding of this test, this time domain, the travail of life. Come to me during this time. He went on to say, take my yoke upon you. This position of this oxen, this olive in a place of actually doing the work. And learn from me, for I am gentle, lowly, humble heart. And you will find rest for your nefesh, for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. He's taking it on. And he's telling us to allow him to do that for our lives. We're going to go through these travails, but we will not be alone. Become one with me, and I am capable of this burden, this yoke. He's going to do it with us. The yoke there, the zugos in Greek, has this relationship to the ancient agricultural practice referring to the cattle. The yoke that would be across the two oxen to keep them joined together as one and to share the burden and to be able to plow the fields. It's an incredible picture given there, and the Greek captures this in relationship to the plowing or the tilling of the fields. While we're in the time domain, the phartion, the burden, the load, the obligations, and what we would face, even to an oppressive state. We looked at these ancient practices are still in play, often in the poorest regions of the world right now, in parts of Asia and India and Africa. And using this simple method of yoking the ox together and the till, and how the one operating the plow would place their weight by hand or foot onto this mechanism that would actually be pushed into the ground, the tilling. And when you looked at it, and we talked about this from the perspective of the ground actually being tilled, the ground of our lives being tilled, when we look up, we would actually see the Aleph and the Tav. I am the Aleph and the Tav. Everything that's going on in this picture is him. He is the one that will actually be the thing that is tilling the ground, and the effort and the force to do this. And all he's asking is, can we have our hand to the plow and be a part of this great plan? And so we saw in the servant king position, he's chosen to take the servant position and for us to look up and to actually see this living statement, I am the Aleph and the Tav. When the ground of our life is being tilled as we're going through this, if we will allow it, if we will be in discipleship, if we will walk with one another, there are times in our lives where we're experiencing such travail, such challenges, that we need to look up and see that he is actually in control. And if we are in a place of servitude where we are actually behind that plow, to remind others of who's actually doing the work and that they are not alone, and to look up and to see the Aleph and the Tav. Incredible picture built into his creation. So this summary of Never Walk Alone, we were looking at and bringing about this discipleship. Why is River Branch so based around the principles of discipleship? Well, quite simply, we're commanded to go and make disciples of nations. Not go and fix people. Not go and try and convince people and control and convert. To actually walk together in the faith and to know that trust is learned, not earned. To learn how to trust again. Many of us have been hurt in our journeys, our religious journeys. We've hurt each other. We've had a lot of stuff in the house. We talked about this whole place of emotionally arrested development and bringing about these spiritually transmitted diseases as we take on all the doctrines and the Talmud of man, and we end up hurting each other. Sometimes even going into sympathy versus empathy, which is helping and serving. Sympathy is when we're actually identifying with someone, but not really helping them. In fact, we could be making it worse. But true empathy is the place of servitude, is the fingerprint of the Ruach, and is the place we want to get to with each other when we serve into one another. But when we're struggling, when we're not in a place of going through healing and forgiveness and getting this leaven out of this house, this spiritual leaven out of the house, the fruit of our lives doesn't look so great at times, does it? And if we're honest, we'll look back over our lives, and many of us have acted and said and done things that we're not proud of. Maybe we've done them in the name of Messiah in our faith. And we're starting to grow and to heal and starting to look and go, perhaps maybe there was another way. And as we get the leaven out of our house, as we approach the great honoring of the appointed times, of the spring appointed times, and we'll be speaking about this in the weeks to come, to get the leaven out of our house, this spiritual leaven, which can hurt others. We talked about not respecting and utilizing the design of both men and women. We got this form of spiritual gender confusion in the house, trying to do each other's jobs or not doing our jobs at all. We don't have order in the house. These are one of the things for servitude, to be able to serve. If we don't have order in our own house, how do we serve another's? Do we have our priorities in order? Have we placing ourselves into the body in a servant role and not allowing him to do it? Trying to do the work of Elohim in his Ruach. Taking on a yoke our way. And then this reminder of who and what we are actually supposed to rest in as we look to serve one another, as we look to help in this healing process, to let go of those destructive things in our lives that continue to bring a calamity, a distress, and a division, a hurt to one another. So we're going to ponder now this greatest in the kingdom based on all these things we've looked at. The whole context of everything we've been doing for the sake of the series was looking at the balance and how he's viewing us and the balance. And again, this reminder of, is the balance of our life in this culture of, in this context of honor and shame. We've lost this. Most certainly Rome has, but unfortunately on both sides of the river, in a lot of the Hebrew roots, Messianic movements, we've lost this. We're not operating in an honor and shame culture anymore. We don't care if our actions and our words and how we treat one another are shameful. We're sitting on the throne of our own lives. It's pride, it's leaven, particularly the leaven of the Pharisees. Those who are religious, but not necessarily circumcised of heart. And sandwiched between our shame is pride and self. So the balance of the scales, what's he looking at? And of course, the encouragement of the whole series is that we would see this from a bride perspective. And that if we can behave and act honorably as the Brit and this thing we call the New Testament deals mostly with character behavior. Not the what, but the why. And how are we presenting the faith to each other and others? What really is our witness? Is it honorable? And if it's to be honorable, I believe the weight of that is humility and serving others. There's a reason for this little in the time domain that we're facing to get this. Because he's got a final age and something that's going to be done on an incredible and grand scale. The previous almost 6,000 years of this great plan of redemption has been but a shadow picture leading up to a grand finale that's coming. And the greatest part before we head into eternity is yet to be seen. We think it's all about us now and what I'm going through in my life and my test. And he's asking us to look into this plan. And I believe these disciples, almost 2,000 years ago, started to get to a place to realize it wasn't just about their lives then and now. It was about their Messiah, their King, their bridegroom, and his great plan of redemption. So as we look at all these things, Does anyone feel like you're plowing circles in your life? Have you ever gone through those aspects of your life and you just feel like I've been here before? You think, why is this happening to me again? Maybe we're trying to do the work that he's supposed to be doing. And yet again, we go around and here we are, dealing with the same things in our lives, the same way, experiencing the same bad fruit. Is it possible that as we sit on the throne of our own lives, that we're going to plow circles? We're not going to plow a field. We're just going to go around and around and wonder why we're not seeing good fruit in our lives. I know I've been there. How many times do we have to see the same thing in our lives before perhaps we'll do it his way? How many times do we have to go to that place where I've been here before? Because if that yoke is uneven, if it's not echad, you will do circles in the tilling of the field. And I can't help but feel that sometimes that many of us may experience this in our lives. And it's time for us to acknowledge this, to turn to him and to let him be Elohim as we go through this time domain. Look at body discipleship. I got this spiritual immune system. This is kind of interesting. I've got here in quotations the 7 main repentant parts of the body dealing with sickness. But it's quite interesting in the creation, and I love some of the creation shadow pictures. There are 7 main organs which contribute to the immune system. Interestingly, how it is the 7 branches of the Kahal, the assembly, his people that is presented in the book of Revelation, that he is in their midst. And it's interesting, if this comes together and works as a body, this spiritual immune system in discipleship, these all have to work together so that when a virus invades us, when something invades the body, that it will work together to deal with this. And if your immune system is not functioning, is not working, we will be overcome by sickness. Well, if that sickness is spiritual adultery, if it's leaven in the house, it will take over the body and it will bring spiritual death. And so to think of discipleship as a part of this place of our spiritual immune system, starting to identify and to understand so that we can heal as a body and do this as a body. Anyway, I just think it was neat that our Father chose to have these 7 main organs working together to deal with this immunity. So, is there judgment for his servants? If we get to this place of thinking about servitude, of wanting to serve, to wanting to be there as a part of this whole play, which the early disciples did, what's the context of that? We'd quickly looked at last week, Matthew 25, 22, 23, and he also had the 2 talents, and these talents, these relationship to a gain, these scales came forward saying, Master, you delivered me 2 talents. Here I am. I've made 2 more. His master said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will now set you over much. This is relating to a judgment seat of Messiah. So the little is our life now. And how do we consider this? He's wanting us to. You know, we look at these things from a perspective of, well, if I just go and do something or much for him, and we take this yoke upon ourselves and we go and do something for Messiah, but we're not prepared, we're not ready. We haven't healed. There is still much unforgiveness in our lives. We are walking alone. We are hurt, and we're serving from a place of bitterness, not being set free. And we, as a result, we go in circles and we hurt others. And we do this religious sort of merry-go-round. But there's a point for those who would serve, for we all must appear before the judgment seat of Messiah. And here's what's interesting. This is speaking to the believers, those of the faith, so that each one may receive what is due for what he has done in the body, whether good or evil. You mean we can do evil in the body as a believer? Can we be wayward? Can we be off the mark if we do this our way? If we do this in a way that is not pleasing to him? The context of this given in 2 Corinthians 5:10 is they were desiring to be with the Messiah, whether in the time domain now in the flesh or from a resurrected, glorified sense. This was the conversation. This is the context of this. And the reminder here to the Corinthians is we must all appear before the bema seat, the judgment seat of Messiah. This is directly reward related. Rewards. Rewards to who? The greatest in the kingdom? Have we decided what our littles are? The ones that get to speak or teach or be on a video like this or run the ministries and all those sorts of things. Those are the ones that are the greatest in the kingdom. Really? Is that what it's saying? Well done, good and faithful servant. I trusted you with the little. What is the little of your lives, and have you demeaned it? I tell you, some of the greatest servitude I see in the body, just from a mother or a father that is raising the children in the Shema in his ways, is some of the greatest servitude that I witness in the body. It appears to me there doesn't appear to be, oh, well, it was the teachers, the rabbis, the prophets, oh, they're the greatest in the kingdom. Doesn't appear that that's the way it's being looked at by a Messiah. In fact, it appears for the teachers and these prophets and these rabbis that they face an even tougher round when it comes to these things. That's why Michael and I both appreciate you don't make life more difficult for us than need be. We're in a great opportunity to make mistakes in these fallen state, and so we need discipleship ourselves. But the essence of the marriage covenant and the family nucleus is the greatest and most intimate form of discipleship, and there is such that has been entrusted to that, and we are seeing the family nucleus and the marriage covenant, everything being busted and broken apart in this modern world, and it's all falling apart. Because the greatest essence of discipleship in the home has been forgotten, the little. Our Messiah is judging something not from a perspective of what we think we do and how great we are. What has he asked you to do? And are we doing this in an honorable way or a shameful way? In Revelation 22, 12, 13, behold, I'm coming soon, and I bring my recompense, as it's rendered here in the English, with me, to repay each one for what he has done. I am the Aleph and the Tav, the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. Mistos, there, in the Greek, this recompense actually means reward, bringing my reward with me. A reward for something, wages used for fruit, resulting from toils and endeavors. In both senses, can this relate to rewards and punishment? Yes, it indicates that in the Greek. He's interested in what we did with the little. So we're going to ask ourselves the question, who's the greatest in the kingdom? He's looking at something, these great balance, these great scales of our lives in this honor and shame context. Do we put ourselves into service when we are not called yet? Will we take hold of this when we're not ready? Yes, and if we do so, we're usurping the throne. And we're jumping on the throne of self. Do we take ourselves out of serving when we need to persevere? He has called us to do something. The struggles, be it from the family to serving a brother or sister, sharing in one another's burdens, thus fulfilling the law of Messiah, needing to preserve in our servitude. Again, we choosing to do this alone or in self, and we take ourselves out. I give up. I'm out of here. We can actually take ourselves out of the little and be like the one who buried it in the ground and didn't do anything with it. We'll be talking more about this in the context of light in the upcoming Appointed Times teachings. Do we have the wisdom to know the difference of what's going on here, whether we put ourselves in a position we shouldn't have, or we've taken ourselves out of something that we need to persevere and go through the travail and the tilling of our lives? From a servitude perspective, do we have the wisdom to know the difference? Are we walking alone trying to do it all in our own strength and not letting him be the Aleph and the Tav? These servant qualifiers, biblical servants. Well, first and foremost, what came out of Messiah is to be in repentance, turn to him and then to one another. Turn to him in his ways, not our ways, not what we think. Engage in a community, being in discipleship, not being the holy man and I hear from God and I just do it my way. He's actually given us his Ruach, his word, his truth, and each other to walk this out in. Do we think we can serve any other way? Getting the leaven out of our house. Walking in and honoring proper biblical design, both with men and women. Are we trustworthy, reliable? Are we gossipers, slanderers, accuser of the brethren? Is this the fruit? And is this what servants truly do? Are we overcoming in particular areas and trials of our lives? Is that a hallmark? Are we going around in circles? Are we gaining his wisdom in our lives? And of course, the great third part of the covenant, taking his name in vain, the actual ambassadorship, the witness of Messiah. You know, biblical servants will be in this place. And if we think we can do that alone, without his Ruach, without each other, we just think we can sit in our little holy cabal and sit there on our own and think that we can do these things. It's quite possible that while we think we are serving him, that we are not, and that we are actually in opposition to our servant king. See, just doing things in and of itself is not a servant qualifier. The what's. I'm going to do something. I'm going to focus on the what's, and we miss the why and what kind of a witness we really are. It says here, reading from the Gospel of Luke 14, 28, 30. For which of you desiring to build a tower does not sit and count? Does not sit down and count the cost, whether he's had enough to complete it, or otherwise when he has laid a foundation is not able to finish. All who see it begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish. You know, this cost of servitude, if we take it right to the marriage covenant, to the family, to servitude to the body, the wider body, do we count the cost? Do we need others to serve into us? The context of this is materials, funding, workers. It's not a position from being alone. Those of us who have started a marriage and unable to finish it because of the way that we built on it and not on his ways. A family serving one another in ministry. This cost. Who's the greatest in the kingdom? We make that claim. We have that thought. But do we have this thought? Count the cost. What can we learn from King David and Solomon in all of this? This is interesting. The wisdom of Solomon. 1 Kings 4, 29, 30. This is recorded. And Elohim gave Solomon wisdom and understanding. Wisdom and understanding beyond measure, and the breadth of mind like the sand of the seashore. In other words, a lot. So that Solomon's wisdom surpassed the wisdom of all the people of the East and all the wisdom of Egypt. Which, of course, this great ruling kingdom that had all the knowledge. It's interesting here how it is given. We often talk about the wisdom of Solomon was given to him, but it's actually wisdom and understanding. This wisdom, the chokhmah, in administration, shrewdness, prudence, skilled in war, ethical, religion, to act wisely, to teach, to instruct. So this great wisdom is given to Solomon. How is it given? And then also an understanding, the tavun, understanding, intelligence, skill, insight, object knowledge, teacher to perceive, to discern, to observe, mark, heed, distinguish, consider. This is interesting how it is two things that were given, but it is the one that surpassed the wisdom. It does not say that Solomon was the most intelligent of all the people in the East and the wisdom of Egypt. It doesn't say he was the smartest. It says he was the wisest. So it focuses on this wisdom that had directly come from Elohim. What's very interesting in this is that Solomon and the way that the father did this was he was discipled and raised by King David, entrusted to the throne of Israel, and in the end finished in a great place of repentance and was pleasing in the Father's eyes. Solomon was raised under this. Do you think it was a magic poof Harry Potter moment? Here, wisdom for you, Solomon. I give you wisdom. Is it possible that the way that the Father did this was discipleship? And that he was raised in one of the greatest discipleship environments, in a father that did his job, and that his little may have actually related to his own son and not just being king of Israel? Just his son. He certainly wasn't claimed to be the smartest. In fact, he did some stupid things. Solomon would go on to let the spiritual leaven and entertain the spiritual leaven of his many wives that would eventually lead to dividing the kingdom. This doctrine of Balaam and sending in the women and taking on their spiritual adultery. Oh, the power of a woman. Balaam knew it. Power of a woman is so great, it can bring down a whole kingdom. Oh, there's a picture coming. Who's the greatest in the kingdom? And if we are given the analogy of the bride for the bridegroom, the woman analogy, there's something that he's doing in this final age, this greatest in the kingdom. And what power does she wield? The power to bring down a kingdom? Will our Elohim choose wisely? Solomon didn't. His understanding, his tavun, did not spare him. Yet the great wisdom he was given, I believe, is directly related through the discipleship from King David. Interesting. You mean wisdom could be directly related in our lives, his wisdom to discipleship, walking with others? I want to be the greatest in the kingdom. Some of us might ask this question. Do I? Yes, I do. The early disciples grappled with this too. This In Matthew 18, 1-5 is recorded here. At the time the disciples came to Yeshua, Matthew records this in this way. Who is the greatest? The disciples came to Yeshua saying, who is the greatest in the kingdom? In the actual Greek rendering would be from heaven. Who is the greatest in the kingdom from heaven? That's interesting. They're starting to get that there's a greater picture here. There's a full plan of redemption. So who's the greatest? It doesn't all just end and stop with my life. Okay. Is that something that we shouldn't desire or to think to ask? Yes. But were they in the right place asking it? We'll see. And calling to him a child. This child's come from somewhere in this picture. And he put him in the midst of them, this child, and said, truly I say to you, unless you turn. The word being used here, the strepho in the Greek, to turn around, to turn oneself, to turn back to one. One who no longer cares for another, turns from a course of conduct, to change one's mind. Not this full picture of metanoia in the Greek, of repentance just to the Father, or teshuvah in the Hebrew to the Father, but this essence of turning one to another is actually what's meant here. Unless you turn and become, look at this, like children. He refers to us often on our faith journey as children and sheep. You will never enter the kingdom from heaven. So there's something here for us to understand. He calls us children. Whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom from heaven. Whoever receives one such child in my name receives me. Interesting. So this aspect of understanding this child perspective is serving each other, actually serving the king. Is this what the Father is actually getting at here? That actually serving and turning to one another, could this be possibly actually serving the king himself? And could you do this if you were walking alone? Just ponder this for a bit. Could you actually, if this is related, serving each other and getting this picture from a child shadow picture, a picture that is being used here to teach us something, could you do this walking alone? The Luke account here, 9:43-45, the context of this is there'd been a child who had demonic spirit cast from him. Very interesting. And all were astonished at the majesty of Elohim. But while they were all marveling at everything he was doing, Yeshua said to his disciples, so they're all in awe, they're marveling at what the master's doing here. Let these words sink into your ears. This is what he says. Let these words sink into your ears. The Son of Man is about to be delivered into the hands of men. What? He's just delivered a child from a demonic spirit as the example preceding this. And they're seeing all of these things demonstrating such power, great power. And then he tells them he's going to be basically put to death. How can that be? Someone who can do these things is going to be put to death by men? But they did not understand this saying. It was concealed from them. How was it concealed from them? So that they might not perceive it. And they were afraid to ask him about this saying. Something's going on in their mind. It's not clicking. And yet Messiah is wanting them to know this. The Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men. Goes on to say this, an argument then arose among them as to which of them was the greatest They're seeing all of this, and now they start to argue amongst each other. Who's the greatest? He's just told them, and it's been concealed to them, I'm going to be put to death. Okay, well, we don't really get that one. But hey, who's the greatest? But Yeshua, knowing the reasoning of their hearts, look at this. It's a heart matter. They are dealing with matters. They're not asking the question for the right reason. In fact, they're not even listening to what he just said. Being concealed from them because of the state of their hearts. He took a child and put it by his side and said to them, whoever receives this child. Now, the antecedent to this is interesting, that there had just been a child delivered from a demonic spirit. Is this the same child? Whoever receives this child in my name receives me. In other words, this turning to it. And whoever receives me, receives him who sent me. So again, this achad picture and turning to this child, perhaps the one delivered. For he who is least among you all is the one who is great. Wait a minute. How does this work? The dachamai in Greek here, to take with the hand, the receives, whoever receives, to take hold, to receive, grant access to, not to refuse, to receive hospitality, to even receive into one's own family, and to bring up and to educate. Think about the discipleship and the example we're using with wisdom, with King David and Solomon. Teaching, instructing, to give an ear, embrace, make one's own, approve, not to reject, sustain, to bear, to endure. Interesting. The one who takes this child, if we're the children, that which would turn to one another is receiving him. You mean if we're receiving each other in this childlike state as we go through this, that there is an achad reality that we could be serving the King? We just think about, and sometimes this person's just a pain in the butt, or they irritate me, or they don't agree with everything I say, or they don't know what I know. We turn them away because we're not willing to go through the tilling of our own circumcision of our heart. It's just easier to reject them. I tell you, without a discipleship environment, that's easy to do. In a discipleship environment, it'll sometimes help you to go places you wouldn't otherwise go. This child asking the why is what children do, and we get irritated with that. Interesting, this deliverance picture. Don't imagine there was much leaven left or a part of this child perspective. What is going on? So where is this headed? If we are to see this as also turning one to another, and therefore we are actually turning to him in us, where is it all headed? Why is this necessary? What is it that he's trying to teach us in relationship to servitude? What is he trying to teach us in relationship to a question that he may want us to truly ask? Who is the greatest in the kingdom? Is the problem asking the question, or is the problem the position for which we're asking it from? There's an interesting shadow picture here. I believe that it's being touched on here by Paul. In 1 Timothy 2:13, 15, we saw this great shadow picture, this great witness of Paul serving into Timothy and Timothy into Paul, and this essence of discipleship, which allows us to even have record of this great testament in the Brit Hadashah of how this all works in a real way. But there's an interesting thing that's given here that's reiterated by them. He says, for Adam was formed first, then Eve, and Adam was not deceived, but the woman was deceived and became a transgressor. The woman is the transgressor, so think of the bigger body picture. We are the transgressors. We are the ones that have done this against his ways, his truth. It's going to require the ransom that was paid on that ancient Tav. He's going to take full responsibility for the fact that we're going to be transgressors. So again, Adam and Eve were a shadow picture of a greater picture that was going to happen. And look at this though. And yet she will be saved through childbearing if they continue in faith, love, set apartness, and with self-control. This is interesting. A true faith based in love, based on his set apart ways, with self-control, character behavior. The word saved there, the sozo, keep safe and sound, to rescue from danger or destruction, one from injury or peril, to save from suffering, one from perishing, to make, heal, restore, health. Interesting, to deliver from the penalties of a messianic judgment. Is it possible that this is a physical shadow picture as we're learning the tutor and we're going through all this great plan of redemption? There's an allusion to a weightier spiritual matter. Is it possible that there is a great last and final age of childbearing to take place in this great plan of redemption? I often refer to it as the raising of the eternal family. Isn't this interesting? The completed work, even in the servitude, during this time before we head into eternity. There might be a big job coming to do, and there might be just an illusion that Paul and Timothy understood here. I've got the Torah made glorified flesh. In Isaiah 2 to 3 here, it says, it shall come to pass in the latter days, so the end of the age, that the mountain of the house of Yah shall be established as the highest of the mountains, the highest of governments, and all shall be lifted up above the hills, and all the nations shall flow into it. So the highest level of government is going to be established by Yah, the kingdom from heaven. And many people shall come and say, come, let us go up to the mountain of Yah, to his government, to the house of Elohim, of the Elohim of Yaakov, that he may teach us his ways, that we may walk in his path. For out of Zion shall come forth the Torah and the word of Yah from Yerushalayim. I'm going to suggest to you that it is quite possible what we are seeing here and what he has seated beside him, this bridal governments, this highest of governments upon the earth at this time. How is this going to happen? Is he going to rely on printed press, Bibles? Or are we actually going to see that in his bridal governance has been seated beside him to be a part of this highest of governments? We're still going to have emotions. We're going to be in a glorified state. But is it possible that those emotions, through our own sovereignty, through the test in the little, that this sanctification and the circumcision of the heart had occurred, and we'd gotten our behavior under control, and we might be operating more in the honor than the shame of these scales? In a glorified state, this is going to be important, because I don't think he's demonstrating us cheating. I've got here, we'll not be cheating like some sort of Avengers movies where we'll be running around with superpowers. Is it possible that there is a sovereign choice that is to be made in this last and great final age by people? And that we are not here to fix, to jump into their sovereign choices. In fact, indeed, even the message of redemption may be even more difficult in this final age because the king is present and so are we. And we will just be normal to them, this highest of governments. Is he going to take sovereignty away from this last final 1,000 years? Is it possible that the living word will go forth from his bridal governance? In other words, I'm going to suggest to you that if we make this place to be able to be a part of this governance, it could be the book of insert your name or your brother and sister's name. Is it possible that the book of Curtis or the book of Michael now is literally going forth and to serve? His Torah made flesh. You know, we need all these things in the shadow pictures, our scrolls, our printed Bibles, everything that got us to this place. But there's something coming where the living word is going to rule a governance. And what do they have on their heart? They've got access to all knowledge. If this was a knowledge-based test, we'd all be in trouble. So what is it? Well done, good and faithful servant. You knew more than everyone else. Is that what it says? Do we know more than him? What is it that we're headed for here? We have access to all truth. There is no more arguments. There's no arguments on calendars, the name of the Father, the shape of the earth, whatever else it is that's dividing us. Utter truth at our disposal and utter wisdom from a 24 elders. In other words, there's not going to be asking the questions in the relationship to the matter of truth and wisdom. Is it more about the hands that it's trusted in and how it's actually able to be witnessed and delivered? No more atheism. It's fascinating. This isn't based on our knowledge. And yet that's what the world has engulfed itself in, on both sides of the Christian riverbank and Judeo riverbanks, engrossed in Gnosticism. Oh, the more I know, the more I know, the more I know. And the more I've walked this path, is I realize the more I don't know. And I am not going to stand before Yeshua. And he's not going to sit there and go, gee, Curtis, I'm glad you're here. I've got some questions that I need to ask you. I've been just dying to know the answer. Standing before all holiness and truth and all knowledge, all information being made available to me and to anyone else who would serve. Interesting. Are these going to become living books? Living word? Both in the presence of Messiah himself and the Torah going forth and his bridal governance doing it with him. Will his bride serve in the final age? Aren't we just out of here? We've done this test thing, this time domain thing. We've done it. Now it's time for me to have my fantasy of what the next age looks like. Who cares what the bridegroom's doing? My vision of the next age is, I'm going to play spiritual golf all day long, or I'm going to do this all day, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to, whatever our vain imaginations come up with. By the way, imagination's mentioned approximately about 8 times in scripture, not once in a positive way. So just so you know, what's he trying to get us that have this opportunity before we go into this final age to get? What have we been invited to? What possibly have we got a chance to be a part of? And what heart are we supposed to have to be involved in this? Something that is designed to serve is coming for this final age. His kingdom come, his will be done. And if the disciples of almost 2,000 years ago, at the time that it had been recorded from what we had listed, had had their heart in the right place, they would have gotten some things, but they weren't ready yet. It's not our plan of redemption. It's his. And no matter what we want to imagine, no matter what we think, no matter what we want to argue, it behooves us, at least his bridal governance, this great government of this final age, that which serves and that will have gotten this. Yes, my king, you have a final stage to go. And we are going to serve. Now, granted, we'll be in a glorified state. Maybe we'll be able to do that without getting tired. That might be one benefit out of it, but it's not an Avengers thing. This beautiful picture of this great mountain, one that's based not on controlship. They're going to have sovereignty, and one certainly not based on a government that's based on usurping. A woman that will usurp him. A government that will usurp him, that could bring down the kingdom. Oh, the power of a woman. I'll tell you, you see it now. We've seen it in all of history. We see it many times in the scripture. If you want to bring a man down, send in the woman. This part of this design picture that has the strength, that's supposed to have the overseeing, the protector role, the spiritual headship role, can be brought down by the helper role, the servant role. And if he's not going to cheat, then his bridal governance is a very serious selection. Oh, this shadow picture is teaching us something, and it is designed to serve, to allow love and sovereignty to be real. Serving the children of the picture to come. But if we can't serve the children of the picture we're in, how are we fit for this? There's a big service ahead. We get a reminder of this in Revelation 27:8. And when the 1,000 years are ended, the adversary will be released from his prison. There won't be an adversary during this time. So all the excuses are going to be removed. They're going to have access to all truth should they desire it. They're going to have proper government. Look at this. And he will come out to deceive the nations. You mean they can be deceived after 1,000 years of the greatest government, Messiah on the throne, a bridal governance, all truth made available? And they can still be deceived. Oh yeah, sovereignty will be in place. It would be impossible for me to reach you from Revelation unless that was the case. They couldn't be deceived unless sovereignty was in this picture. Unless they had to grapple with the circumcision of their hearts, whether they had to go through the tilling of their lives, whether they needed to have a servitude, an olive and tav government. Look at this. That the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, gather them for the battle, and their numbers are like the sand of the sea. This means a lot of them. Do you know a lot of people are not going to get this in the final age? In fact, they're going to be to such a point, or at least didn't repent to the point where they couldn't be deceived. This is an incredible picture unless you really understand what it is. It's the final winnowing, the final testing of their hearts. Goes on to say in Revelation 29:10, and they marched up over the broad plain of the earth, and they surrounded the camp of the saints and the beloved city. But fire came down from heaven and consumed them. And the adversary, the devil who deceived them, was thrown into the lake of fire and sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet were. And they will be tormented day and night, forever and ever. the context of all of this, as unbelievable as it may seem, is following the 1,000-year reign of Messiah. People's hearts will have a chance to choose. And it's inconceivable to us from this position being given the opportunity to take part and to serve into this final round. How could these people do this? But what we don't realize after generations and after the start of this last and final great age, that they're going to be children born into this picture where King Yeshua is normal and so is his bridal governance. This is their norm. And will they take this for granted? Will they have? In fact, it could be even a more difficult position and more required position to serve into this great and final plan. I would suggest to you that this is given to us in Revelation to suggest how important and how great this actually is, because a lot are still not going to choose him. So what about the greatest in the kingdom then, Curtis, as we looked at this? What about this greatest in the kingdom? The greatest in the kingdom. Paul would talk about to finish our race, right? He talked about this place where we were to go hard and to finish our race. And he gave it this analogy in relationship to the bema seat and the judgment seat and all those sorts of things. But what's interesting about this race is a Hebrew idiom, a statement. This first shall be last. In 1 Timothy 1:8-9, it's kind of captured here. Take what belongs to you and go. So this parable of the laborers in the vineyard that was given by Messiah. Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give this last worker as I give to you. I am not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me. Am I not allowed to choose what belongs to me? Do you begrudge my generosity? And he says here, so the last will be first and the first last. That's only possible if we are finishing together. And I believe that it is only possible if we understand how we're supposed to see the greatest in the kingdom from its true perspective. Look here in Mark 10:35-37. And Yaakov and Yochanan, John, the sons of Zebedee, came up to him and said to him, Teacher, look at what they say. We want you to do for us whatever we ask of you. Are their hearts in the right place? And he said to them, what do you want me to do for you? And they said to him, grant us to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left, in your glory. So they're getting this kingdom thing. Oh, they want to be the greatest. But do they know the cost? Are they of the right heart? Yeshua said to them, you do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup I drink? Or to be baptized with the baptism for which I am to be baptized, delivered into the hands of men? And they said to him, we are able. Remember, something was concealed. They're not really getting this. We are able. We see all the neat things you're doing. We want to be great just like that. And Yeshua said to them, the cup that I drink, you will drink. And with the baptism from which I am baptized, you will be baptized. But to sit at my right hand or my left is not mine to grant, but is for those whom it has been prepared. Interesting. Is it possible this great event of Shavuot hasn't taken place, the gifts of the Spirit coming in? Is it possible that repentance, sacrifice, and sovereignty is also being alluded to here? Is what he's saying directly related to the cup he drinks? Is baptism by fire? Is it possible that sovereignty, meeting the sovereignty of Elohim, allows us to be in the choice of something, to allow us to be eligible to be chosen. In other words, this place is being prepared, but the granting may be in a chad position. And when the 10 heard it, they began to be indignant. So they're being indignant, Yaakov and Yochanan. This indignant feeling and showing anger because something is unjust or unworthy. So now the others are feeling indignant because these guys are wanting to be the greatest in the kingdom. Nobody getting it. Are we really willing to go through this tilling, this travail, the test, and to turn to him and each other? And did he give us away if he remains the Aleph and the Tav? You know, I've got here kingdom servants versus public servants. An interesting example made. Did anybody appreciate there's a difference between perhaps how the Father's looking at kingdom servants and how currently we view public servants? Who here thinks your government, your public servants? Notice that term. I think it's an oxymoron these days. In fact, serving in the governments these days upon the earth is a way to get rich now. It's a way to get wealthy at the hands of the burdens placed upon its citizens. Are they public servants? Are the prime ministers and presidents and kings and leaders, are these servants really? You know, nothing new under the sun. Mark 10, 41, 44, and Yeshua called them to him and said to them, you know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them. Okay, so nothing new under the sun. So don't think what's happening in our governments today is any different. They're great ones. Exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among you. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant. Interesting. Whoever be great among you must be your servant. And whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. Now, that's the English translation there, slave, you know. That's where people go, see, you know, they're trying to promote slavery. No, the word there in Greek, the doulos, is bondman, man of servile condition, one who gives himself up to another, devoted to another, to disregard one's own interests, a servant, an attendant. The root of this, the deo, to bind, to tie, to fasten, can be even to forbid, of the Torah, to be bound to one. And look at this, it's a wife and a husband, a covenant, a chad, perspective. Incredible. Whoever would be first among you will be bonded, achad, as if in the way of the shadow picture of a husband and wife. Interesting how even the Greek will capture that, and yet our English gives us no context at all. A bond servant in an achad covenant analogy, captured here in Mark 10, 41 to 44. So who is the greatest in the kingdom? Curtis, it's the name of the final teaching of this. Why do you not answer me? Because it's been concealed to you. No. Who is the greatest in the kingdom? Oh, we have the benefit. The brother or sister serving you. This is what our Messiah is saying. Look beside you. Look on the screen. Look at those who you walk with. If you're walking alone, you're not going to be able to do this. But if you are walking with others and in discipleship and learning to bond one to another, turning to each other and therefore Messiah in them, the greatest among you is the one serving you. What a competition that would be. What a witness. Could you imagine if there was a world witnessing? Every single one of us being the servant one to another. The greatest in the kingdom to learn the lesson to serve now. Imagine if the world was truly witnessing this. How they share in one another's burdens, how they walk together, how they honor him. And by doing so, they turn to each other and receive each other as children and feed into one another. And therefore, they are receiving Messiah and they are serving Messiah. This beautiful Echad picture. Is it possible that when your brother or sister is serving you, that they are getting the opportunity to serve Messiah in the true faith, in the true picture? Our Messiah believes this is the one who's in the greatest position, not the one demanding it, but the one serving in this time domain and in the time to come is the greatest among us. I often make the statement, Michael and I sometimes banter with it, and same with some of the others in our discipleship environment with the other men. But when they serve into us, I'm looking at the greatest in the kingdom. When they serve me, I'm looking at the greatest. And when I serve them, they're looking at the greatest. What a picture, what a witness if we can get this. This beautiful picture of the Aleph and the Tav and his servitude, the strength of Elohim to accomplish what he has started by serving the servant, serving us, that we would serve others, and therefore we would serve him. Our Elohim plans to be a servant king, and he will serve right to the end, and he will have the greatest of governments sitting beside him, who also is going to be willing to serve to the end. The final age. And he's choosing to do this with his assured rod, his bridal governance. And what did that assured rod learn to do? To serve. Who is the greatest of the kingdom? It's obviously our bridegroom, our king, Messiah, HaMashiach. And if he's in us and we are serving him in us, then we join in that greatest position. We don't get to just usurp it from him. Isaiah 46:13. I bring near my righteousness, it is not far off, and my salvation. King Yeshua Messiah will not delay. I will put salvation in Zion for Israel, my glory. His glory is us. Just like that great shadow picture of a husband and wife. And our glory is him, Echad. Come, Yeshua Messiah. May we finish your great plan together. Let's stop there. We'll finish there and come join Michael and I in the Q&A here shortly.